Pardon me? The booklet for both days. Yes, that's a yes. Yeah, yeah. So I did print out these slides. I'm just going to just do it as a talking piece. But this is essentially the layout of your diploma. So 24 multiple choice, 8 numeric response, and then 2 written response at the very end of the exam. Now, these are unit specific. So they go through in a specific order, whereas the written response questions, these 2 questions will pull from multiple units. So part A might be a polynomial, part B might be a sinusoidal, part C might be a rational. So if you're thinking in your brain going, how do all those units play along? They don't, but they can tie everything together through a common context, right? So that's how they're going to spin it. Typically, the questions have 4 parts, but I noticed on the last diploma is one question had 3 parts and the other one had 4. But they will be worth a total of 7 marks. Okay. Now, there's a few words I need you to know. Okay. If the question says algebraically, determine, this means you're going to use algebra. Or in other words, you're going to use your formulas, you're going to solve for x, and all that. If the question just says determine, this means you can do it by algebra, or by graphing, or by regression. You have a choice in it. You don't have to do it algebraically. So if the question says algebraically determined, you have to use algebra. If the question just says determine, it's your choice. Okay. Evaluate means the answer is always going to be a number. So typically for this, we just use our calculator because you're looking for the value. So let's say evaluate the following equation for x equals 7. So you just plug 7 in. That's it. If the question says justify just means show your work. Now, that work could be a graph, it could be algebra, it could be regression. It could be anything. It just means show your work. If you just write down an answer on a page without work, you're not going to get full marks. Sketch is another word for graph. You don't have to plot any points, but you must give the window settings. And we've talked about that a ton. So min-max scale. And then the last word, and unfortunately it's kind of hidden back here, it's the word compare. Now, on the last diploma, there wasn't a question that said compare. So if you think about your social studies class, when you're told to compare two ideologies, what does that mean to you? Like if I say compare socialism to democracy, what would you talk about? You talk about the ways that they are similar. It does not mean that in math. Compare means tell me how they are similar and tell me how they are different. In social studies, it will say compare and contrast. In math, it will just say the word compare. And when you compare, you talk about the ways that they're the same and the ways that they are different. Now, those words will be bolded. So it will say determine algebraically with a big bolded algebraically. So you'll know to do that. Now look, if you can't remember the algebra or you think you're screwing up the algebra, what you do is you draw a little squiggle down your page, and on the other side of that squiggle, you do it, let's say, graphically, or you do it using your calculator or whatever. You're going to get credit for the answer, you're just not going to get credit for the work, because you found the answer, you just didn't do it algebraically. Do not leave any part of them blank. If you leave any part of it blank, you're forcing them to give you 0. You're forcing them to give you 0. Whereas if you write down something, anything, here's what I mean. Here's the point value. So a 1, the student demonstrates basic math understanding. They talk about an appropriate strategy. Here, minimal math understanding. They have some relevant knowledge. So if you're doing something algebra, it's like for 1 mark, if you write down even anything remotely close to what they're talking about, even if you have no idea, like for example, some kids will be like, hey, this is an exponents thing. Okay, this is what I remember about exponents. I remember this, but I have no idea how I'm supposed to use that to do this question, but I'm going to write down what I know. Fantastic. There's your 1 mark. But if you leave it blank because you feel like you can't answer it correctly, you're going to force themselves to give you 0. Okay. Now, depending on how much of this information you write down, you'll either get a 0.5 or a 1. Now, it's not subjective. So if it's like, oh, I hope I don't get a hard marker. We sit in tables of about 12 to 16 people, and what they do for the first morning of the 3-day session is they train us on how to mark. So they say, this is what a 0.5 mark will look like. This is what a 1 looks like. And we do it over and over and over again. And then they start pulling tests, and we all mark the same test. And if we don't all agree on the same mark, we're trained again. And if we still don't agree, let's say everybody at the table agrees but me, they will pull me and say, goodbye. You're not learning this fast enough. So they are quite intense with making sure it is fair and accurate for everybody. Okay. Okay. So we're not going to do both parts of this question because I realized yesterday that the second part of this question is actually in Math 30-1, but we'll get going with this. So I handed this out to you, right? Okay. So it says 2 rural Alberta towns experience changes in population due to the construction of a new highway. Equations modeling the population of each town where P is the population and T is the number of years after January 1st, 2016 are shown below. So part A of the question is describe the significance of each numerical value in each equation listed above. Now, I have crossed out the second question here, but I will circle back to it here in just a second. Do you see how they've put both questions together? They will not do that on the diploma. They will do one question and then give you like a half a page of workspace, and then the next question and a half a page of workspace. They're going to give you way more workspace than what you actually need, because the psychology behind it is, and this is tested, the more white space you put on a page, the less freaked out kids will get. Okay, so for example, in books, the bigger the font, kids internalize that as being easier reading than small font. Even if it's the exact same text, if it's the exact same story, you write one in big font, you write one in small font, the kids will automatically think the small font is a harder story to read versus the big font. Okay, so they will give you lots of white space on the pages to try and keep you calm. That doesn't mean you need to fill it up. Okay, so for part A, this is how I would write it out. You don't need to use fancy letters or fancy words. You just need to kind of somewhat describe it to the best of your ability. So this is exponential growth and decay. What does the first number in that equation always represent? So we talked about this yesterday. What does the A value always represent? Do you remember? Right, it's the start. So in order to relate this back to the question, it's the starting population of the town. So the town starts at 4,000 people. The 0.97. Now that's the B value. Now first off, you should notice that B here is between 0 and 1. So is this a growth or is this a decay? This is a decay. So the town population is decreasing. Now, how much is it decreasing by? It's not 97%. What is it? 3%. think about it. If you lost 97% of your town's population every year, that means after 1 year, so you're going to start at 4,000, the next year you'd have like 200 people. Then the next year you'd have 5, right? That doesn't make sense. Now, if you struggled with the words, you could draw a picture. So you could say, okay, the population is 4,000. It's going down by 3%, like that. So you could draw a picture to help you illustrate. So if you're not sure if you've described it well enough, you can always draw a picture. Now, it did say for both towns. So for town B, the starting population is 2,500. Now this B value is bigger than 1. So it's growing. So the population is increasing by what? How much? What percentage? It's not 1.05. It's not 105. It's 5. It's increasing by 5%. So if you wanted to draw a picture, you would show it as 2,500 is the start, and it's going up by 5%. So that would probably be worth 2 marks. Now, where would you lose marks? So what if you only talked about the 4,000 and the 2,500 and you forgot to talk about B? Okay. Or another thing that might cost you half a mark is you say that the town population is decreasing, but you don't say by how much. You just say it's decreasing. So it's a partial answer. You didn't do it perfectly. Okay. But what I really want to emphasize to you is you don't need to be perfect to get it right. So unlike multiple choice, you need to be perfect to circle the right answer. Written response, you just need to write down your thoughts and hope that it's enough. Okay? Questions on part A. So they would give you a half a page to write all that in. You don't need to fill up that half page. Okay, I am going to move these 2 lines out of the way. What makes this question, Math 30-1, is the word algebraically. I'm just going to cross that out, and we're going to do this as a determine. So we're not going to do it as a 30-1 question. We're going to do it as a 30-2 question. Okay? So it says, determine the number of years to the nearest tenth that it will take for the population of the 2 towns to be the same. So option 1 is you've got 4,000 and you're coming down. Town number 2 is you've got 2,500 and it's going up. What are you looking for? Where they intersect. So you would do Y1 Y2 you would draw the picture, you would find the t value, okay, and then you must give the window settings. Now, the window settings that you give have to be so that you would get out this exact picture. So in other words, your min has to be 0 because you can't have negative years and you can't have a negative population. So I'm just going to do this on my handheld. Now, I was doing this on my handheld the other day. So right now, when I go to y equals, what do you see as the problem? So I was just doing a regression yesterday with you. What is the problem right now? Plot 1 is highlighted. So we have to unbold plot 1 in order to be able to make this thing work. So go up to make it flash and then come back down. Okay, so I'm just going to do mine on my handheld here. So 4,000.97 to the x, and then 2,500 1.05 to the x. Okay, so for window settings, what should your Y max be in order to be able to see that 4,000? What would you make your Y max? Probably 5,000. Now you can use whatever you want for scale. They don't actually care about the scale. You can, as long as you have the 0 on the 5,000. Now for T, it's a guessing game. I've got mine just set at 10 right now, but I might have to change it. Oh no, 10 works. So I went from 0 to 10. Okay. It doesn't look quite that sharp of a curve. And then I'm going to find the intersect. So hit enter 3 times. And I get out 4.247 years. So it says determine the number of years to the nearest tenth it will take for the population of the two towns to be the same. So it'll be 4.2 years for the population to be the same. Did I do something wrong? Oh, it's 0.97. I have in 0.94. Hold on. Okay. Sorry. Typed it in wrong. My bad. What did you get? Okay. Okay. Sorry. I punched in 0.94 to the power of x instead of 0.97. Okay. So because they'll say determine, that means you can choose to do it by graphing calculator instead of algebra. By the way, you guys haven't learned how to do this question algebraically. You just haven't. So that's why I originally just wanted to talk about that. Okay, but if you're going to solve graphically, you must put the window settings, and the window settings must match what you're actually sketching out on your page. Okay. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. All right. So let's try a rationals one. I don't think we'll get through this, but we'll give it a go. So again, see on 2A, see how they put two things together? They won't do that. They'll do part A, they'll leave space, then they'll do part B. Okay. So in Math 30-2, the teacher gives the class the following rational expressions. So part A, state all the non-permissible values. Okay, so what did we learn about rationals yesterday? Well, the first thing you should do, regardless of what you're being asked, it doesn't matter what you're being asked. It doesn't matter. Honestly, what I do when I see a rational, I don't even read the question. I just start factoring and then I read the question. Okay, because it's going to be step one no matter what you do. So, non-permissible values. Okay, so that's the denominators. So I'm just going to start factoring the heck out of this thing. So what can I do with 3x squared and 18x? Take out a 3x. Yep. And what are you left with once you've done that? Right. And if you're not sure if you've done it right, take half of a second and multiply this back through and make sure you end up right where you started. Okay. The bottom is going to be difference of squares. So x times x, 6 times 6, and then what do? Plus minus. For the other one, there's nothing I can do with 28. It's just fine. What can I do with the 4x and the 24? Take out a 4. So I'm left with x minus 6. Okay. So for my restrictions, plus 6 will be negative 6. X minus 6 will be positive 6. X minus 6 will also be positive 6. Do I need to worry about the 4? Nope, because there's no x with it. So that is question number 1. That is probably going to give you 2 marks out of 3, or 2 marks out of 7. Okay? Part B. Now, of all the parts, so parts A, B, C, D, one of the parts, it doesn't mean the first part, but one of those 3 or 4 parts should be a very, very, very easy question so that everybody can get 1 or 2 marks on that question. Okay, so if you feel like so even if it's part C, if part C is super easy, fantastic. It doesn't have to be part A. Okay. Okay, determine the simplified product. What does product mean? Times. So we're going to go 3x times x plus 6 over x plus 6, x minus 6 times that. Okay, so when we multiply, again, first step is factor. Second step is to cross off anything. So you can cross off vertically and you can cross off diagonally. So the only thing I can cross off right now is x plus 6. That's it. So I'm going to go 3 times 28. I think it's 84. And then I'm left with 2 x minus 6's. And then what you have to do is you have to check your monomials. So on your calculator, go 84 divided by 4. If it's a decimal, go math 1. And you end up with that. Now, that would be another 2 marks. So now you've earned 4 marks out of 7. Okay, so not too horrible, right? Not too horrible at all. It's just you're getting credit for your work. I want you to look. There was one really nasty, one part of one of the long answers was really horrible on the January, and I will go through that one with you next week. But for the most part, they just were basic questions. It's just you're getting credit for the work. Okay. Okay, so this is the same question, because notice it says part B now. Okay. So it says the Math 30-2 teacher also gives the class a diagram of a rectangle with dimensions represented, where x is greater than 5 as shown below. She reminds the class the perimeter of the rectangle is the sum of all the lengths. So it says, given the perimeter of the rectangle is 46, write an equation that can be used to solve for x. Algebraically determine the value of x to the nearest equation. Explain why x is greater than 5 for the rectangle above. Okay, they would probably do this guy first and then make this guy the last question because this is a little easier to understand. So let's do this one first. Okay, when you're talking about the length of the side of a shape, what type of number do we always have to have? A positive. Okay, so when we think about this, what's the restriction here for this? X cannot equal 5. But let's say x equaled 4. Let's just say x equals 4. If I make x equal to 4, I'm going to have 3 times 4 on the top and 4 minus 5 on the bottom. Well, that's going to lend me out a number of negative 12. Does it make sense that I can have a side length of negative 12 centimeters? No. So the way to make sure that I don't ever end up with a negative is to make sure that when I plug in numbers, I plug in numbers that are only bigger than 5. Because if I plug in a number less than 5, like a 3 or a 2 or a 1 or a 0, as long as I don't plug in 5, right? But if I plug in anything less than 5, I'm going to end up with a negative. So I have to make sure I only plug in numbers bigger than 5. So when it says explain why, what you could do for the explanation is say, well, if x equaled 4, for my widths, I would go 3 times 4 over 4 minus 5. So that would be negative 12 centimeters. And that is not good. You don't have to be fancy in your explanation. So then you would say, so my sides must be positive numbers, so x must always be greater than 5. So in that explanation there, I did a sentence. I also worked it out with a number so if I wasn't sure if they could understand my sentence, they could see what I meant by plugging in a number. When you explain means describe it in a sentence. It could mean plugging in a number to show what you mean. It could be drawing a picture to show what you mean. Explain means anything. Just explain your thoughts. You don't have to be fancy pants. Okay? For the second part of this question, perimeter. Perimeter means add up all the sides. So we're going to go 3x over x minus 5 plus 3x over x minus 5 plus 45 over 3x minus 15 plus 45 over 3x minus 15. And that perimeter equals 46. Okay, if you have an integer, put it over 1. First thing I do, doesn't matter what question we give you, first thing you do is you factor. Is there anything I can do with x minus 5? Is there anything I can do with 3x? Is there anything I can do with 45? Is there anything I can do with 3x minus 15? So I can take a 3 out, and I'm left with x minus 5. Okay. When you are adding or subtracting, what is the second step you do? Common denominator. Now, common denominator of both sides, whole kit and caboodle. So look at your numbers first. What number do you need to have on the bottom? You've got 3s and 1s, so you need a 3. Now let me just pause here. What if you had a 3 and a 2? What number would you write here? 6, right? Because 3 and 2, you multiply them. Yes. Okay. Now, what bracket do I need? Just the x minus 5. Only one of them. Okay. All right. I'm just going to go in and write in all of my numerators. Okay. So the first denominator is x minus 5. So what do I need to insert to make them the same? So this one already has the x minus 5. So all I need to insert in is the 3. So I'm going to go 3x times 3. I'm going to do the same for the next one. This denominator has the 3 and the x minus 5. So is it missing anything? So is this denominator missing anything? No. So I'm going to leave the 45 alone. Same thing here. Leave the 45 alone. The 46 over 1. This is a 1. It now says 3x minus 5. What do you notice? It's missing everything. So I need the 3 and I need the x minus 5. Right? I need everything. The third step will always be your favorite. You're going to cross out all the bottoms. Now, before you do that though, make sure you give the restriction. So off to the side, what is my restriction? X cannot equal 5, because 5 minus 5 would give 0. So cross that out. Okay, we have got 9x plus 9x plus 90 equals, oh, someone help me here. What's 46 times 3? 138 times x. What's 138 times 5? Awesome. Okay. Okay. So, so the fourth step is now to solve. So remember, you'll either be in grade 8, so you'll just have x's and numbers, or you'll be in grade 12, where you'll have x squareds, x's, and numbers. So we did one of these yesterday where we made it equal to 0, and then we factored it. Okay. This one's a little easier. We just have x's and numbers. So go back to grade 8. So I'm going to minus 18x on both sides. So I have 120x minus 690. I'm going to add 690 to both sides. 780. And I'm going to divide both sides by 120. I have no idea what that is. 6 point. Okay. Okay. Now do a quick little check. This is 6.5. This says not equal to 5. Do I have any conflicts? No. Okay, go back and read the question. Make sure you've actually answered it. The question was, given the perimeter, algebraically determine the value of x to the nearest tenth using this equation. So nearest tenth is 6.5. Now, that is going to be the 3 marks. Now look, if you make a mistake in step 1, is everything going to be wrong? Yes. But the way the diploma marks is they say, okay, this child made 1 mistake. Their process was absolutely perfect. But let's say here instead of writing 46, you had a brain fart and wrote 64. So your entire math is wrong. The answer is wrong, but your process was perfect. You factored, you common denominated, you crossed off the bottoms, you solved for x. Perfection. You just made 1 mistake. You will get 2 marks out of 3. You're not going to get 0, like a multiple choice question or a numeric response. So even though written response sounds terrifying to you, it is your actual saving grace because you get credit for all the thinking that you can do. Okay. Now, let's say you had no idea what to do. What you can do, you should all be able to do that. Add up the sides equal 46. That will get you either 0.5 or 1 mark. Then what you could do is you could go y1, y2, and you could find the intersect. That would give you another 0.5 because you at least found the answer. But you won't get the bulk of the marks because you didn't do algebra. You did the determine, you just did it determining graphically instead of algebraically. Okay?